Today what I'm going to go over is your study guide for Era 3. This is going to be the causes leading up to the Revolution, and the beginning of the government with the Articles, okay? So, for the first question, you had to explain why the colonists were unhappy with the Proclamation of 1763, and you had to tell the geographic feature that was actually dividing the line. So when you look at the Proclamation, this is following the French and Indian War. And the French and Indian War was about this Ohio Valley area, the River Valley area. England and France have a dispute. Remember, France is up here in Canada. And when the mother country, England, is at war, so are her colonies. So Britain, England, they're fighting France in Europe. And it spills over here into the colonies, and it's called the French and Indian War here, the 7 Years' War in Europe. But after the fighting is said and done and Britain comes out the winner, they take Canada. And so now the ruler of North America really is the British, or at least this part. And so when the colonists get this proclamation, they're a little, taken back because they think that now that this proclamation has happened, they're going to be able to get all this land. But Britain says, no, we're going to go ahead and use the Appalachian Mountains to go ahead and be a fence, a border. And this fence, this border, is just a natural one that's already there. The mountains are really hard. This is not when you had a train, you don't have a car, you have to walk this. So they tell the colonists here in the 13 colonies, you guys stay here, don't cross the mountains. If you cross the mountains, here are going to be the American Indians. This land is being reserved for them. They won't cross, and you won't cross, and everybody's going to be happy together. Now, if the American Indians cross this path, if they cross that fence line, then Britain, England's saying, we will protect you. If the colonists cross this line, then they are on their own. When the colonists hear this news, they're very upset because they're getting cramped for space here, particularly like in Virginia. You have large plantations that have developed thanks to the headright system, thanks to the influx of slavery, so we have huge plantations in Virginia. The poor white guy who has just a couple acres of land is living here on the outskirts and is hoping to eventually expand his property. He'd like to become a plantation owner. He'd like to be like the Jeffersons, the Madisons. They're looking at these big plantation owners and thinking, oh, we can be just like them. But the only way you can be like them is if you get land. And Britain just put a lid on that. You're not going to ever be able to expand. And now Britain believes that they're doing this because, one, it will have better relationships with the American Indians in the future, and two, their debt. Their debt is huge because they just fought the French and Indian War. Question 2 is, what event caused Britain to issue that proclamation of 1763, and what purpose did the British hope this dividing line would serve? So I kind of just went over it, but it's during the French and Indian War. An American Indian, Pontiac, is going to actually do a rebellion, and we talked about him and his rebellion in Era 2. So Pontiac is going to lead American Indians in the Ohio area against the British settlers. And so when Britain is finally able to put all this stuff down, and remember, the American Indians side with the French, and part of that is due to the treatment of the French, how they treat the American Indians. So when the French and Indian War is going on, the French and the American Indians are allies. And so after the war, Britain kind of reevaluates, and they reevaluate their relationship, and they finally figure out, if we stop messing with the American Indians, if we don't allow the colonists to mess with them, then the American Indians are not going to be leading rebellions against us, like Pontiac's rebellion or Metacom's war. Okay, so they finally hope they get peace. And here's, King George III over here. And Parliament's really the one who creates this, because remember, when you're talking about the British government, Parliament's actually making all the laws. The king is more or less like a figurehead at this point. He has power, but it's really Parliament that has the most power. So question 3 is, who benefited from mercantilism, the British or the colonists? And then you had to list 2 facts about it. So remember, mercantilism is just an economic policy, and it's a policy that the mother country will always have more money than anyone else. And basically in this economic policy, the mother country is going to use the colonies to supply raw materials. The mother country will then take all those raw materials, process it, refine it, and sell it back to their colonies at a higher price. So it's always going to have a favorable balance of trade. Britain will always sell more than they will buy. So think about it like any good business. A good business, like when you look at car lots, they sell more cars than they're willing to buy. Not everybody is going to be able to trade in their vehicle when they go to a car lot. Okay? So it's always going to be a favorable balance of trade for the mother country. The colonies are simply for raw material: tobacco, rice, indigo, cotton, and they do other stuff, grains and things, but basically the mother country is just using the colonies for unrefined, unprocessed, raw goods, farm goods. And remember, in the colonies, 9 out of 10 colonists are farmers. So that pretty much kind of like tells you what mercantilism is all about. Now, when you look at this chart here, it's the economic growth in America. So when you look at the 1700s, this is really when you have at the beginning, a lot of people are actually starting to get wealthy. Remember, when the colonists are coming over here, one of the reasons why they're coming over here is for economic gain, for land. And so when you look at that economic gain in land, these people wouldn't have had any of that over there in England. But they come here and they're now starting to have it. And look at 1740. Look at 1760. This is why the colonists will start to realize if you cut out the middleman, you could actually make more money. And so you're looking at the years right here before the Revolution and then after the Revolution. A little bit of a drop. You got to get trade partners and stuff by then. You're having to pay off debts and stuff. So, there's going to be a little bit of disruption. But you can see, as you go along here, what America's hoping. By 1840, when you see this line right here, this is actually when the Industrial Revolution really takes off here in the United States. This is when we will start to rival our former mother country, Britain, in industrial output. So you can see where it says that it's the takeoff of factories and railroads. So we're dreaming of this, even though we're back here in 1740. We're dreaming of this, even though we're back here in 1760. And that dream becomes more reachable if you just get some rebels to start a war. Question 4 is, what was it called when the British ignored illegal colonial smuggling? It's salutary neglect. I tell you, it's like a deadbeat parent. They don't care about the colonies really, other than if the money's coming in. So, think about like Hollywood stars, like the child stars. A lot of times the parents are just living off those Hollywood child stars. They don't really care about them. Their kids doing everything and anything that they want. And then the moment the child star doesn't make any more money, all of a sudden they try and swoop in and be parents again. That's salutary neglect. And that's pretty much what Britain had been doing. They were neglectful parents. They were not paying attention to the colonies. And so the colonies were able to do whatever they wanted. And smuggling was just a part of the norm. Like, why would you call them on it? They've been doing it for 100 years. So when Britain tries to enforce the Navigation Acts and tries to enforce their policies of you will have your stuff on a British-owned boat, you will bring your stuff into a British harbor, you will pay taxes, the colonists are like, what are you talking about? We've never done any of this before. Why are we going to start doing it now? Remember, another thing I made, the comparison to is teachers who don't enforce their rules, their policies. All of a sudden you want to enforce it, you're going to get pushback. So Britain is going to get pushback on this. So number 5 is, what is the name of the laws that both British and the colonists were ignoring? Navigation Acts. The Navigation Act said you have to put your stuff on a British ship. And that's to make sure that those smugglers, those regular merchants who have been illegally hiding stuff in their boats aren't hiding it anymore. If it's on a British boat, they know that there's no false bottoms to the boat. They know that, you don't pull up a little wooden plank part and all of a sudden there's, $1,000 worth of goods hidden underneath it. You didn't know about it. So the Navigation Acts are now going to be enforced, and therefore taxes are going to have to be enforced. Number 6 is England kept a favorable balance of trade. Explain what that means. It means that they import less than they actually export. They send out, okay? Sorry, I had an interruption. They sold more than they are going to purchase. So when they're bringing in the cotton, the tobacco, the rice and stuff, they're paying the lowest price possible. So even though they're bringing in that stuff, they're not paying top dollar for it, which is why you're going to see a lot of the colonists trying to smuggle goods out of the colonies to go to other countries who are willing to pay more. Britain is really going to try and enforce this. You can only sell to us. This is part of the Navigation Acts. This is part of mercantilism. You can't sell to anyone else. England has a monopoly on the colonies. And the colonists get resentful of it, because if you go to France for that cotton or for that tobacco that Britain's only willing to give you a couple pennies for, a couple, like pounds, and it was pounds back then, you can go to France and they're going to give you a heck of a lot more money. So it was almost in the colonists' interest to kind of become smugglers and pirates. Why are you going to sell it to somebody who's not going to pay you top dollar? When you go try and buy a car and you're going to trade in your car, you're going to take your car to several places before you actually find one that you're willing to trade it into. You want top dollar for your item. But England is not going to do that. They are always going to have the balance of trade in their favor. Question 7 is, what is a tariff or a duty? This is just a tax on imported or foreign goods. So anytime a tax is being placed on an item, the price of the item goes up. And the colonies have not really been accustomed to paying taxes. This is why the Navigation Acts are really hard for them to actually kind of get back in line and say, yeah, we're going to follow it. But also they have this trend to kind of lie too about taxes. So even when they do pay, they don't pay the full amount. So when you look at a tax on an imported or foreign made good, that's pretty much all that British stuff that's coming into the colonies. So America has just a real hatred towards tariffs at different parts. So we'll look at this tariff of abominations when we look at President Jackson. So we'll look at this one. But you can see how you have ups and downs on the tariffs as time goes on. If you want to encourage American-made equipment to be bought by Americans, tariffs need to be really high. If you want to encourage competition, then you make tariffs low. Question 8 is, what law taxed things like coffee and sugar that entered colonial ports? That's that Sugar Act. And this is sugar cane. Remember, I told you it's a very quick turnaround on that whole sugar cane to actually process it and get it actually where it's this granulated sugar. So when you look at the Sugar Act, the colonists are going to naturally rebel against it. They're going to tell the British that they don't feel it's fair. And eventually Britain is going to repeal the Sugar Act. So they do put a tax on coffee and sugar. This is a direct tax. You know that when you buy these items, okay? Question 9 is, why does England need to tax the colonists? They got to pay off the French and Indian War debt. The American colonists, or the colonists at this time, were needing help from Britain. Okay, they needed help from their mother country to fight off the French and Indian attacks on their land. And the colonists kind of are bewildered when Britain and England says, you have to actually pay the taxes. You have to pay up on this debt. We accumulated a debt defending you. You need to help pay off that debt.